Since we last talked, the Orioles played a couple of baseball games. They won one of them. Adley Rutschman returned to the field, and we learned Pete Fairbanks is quite a garbage human being. That's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Thursday, September 25th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the last two games the Orioles have played against the Tampa Bay Rays in the Mid-Bowl happening here at the bottom of the AL East. Orioles winning 6-0 on Tuesday night. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one, including a really strong finish to the season for Dean Kremer. Then the Orioles falling to the Rays 6-2 on Wednesday night. We'll, of course, get into whatever the hell Pete Fairbanks decided he wanted to do at the end of that game. And then we'll talk a little bit about kind of the biggest baseball news of the week, besides these really awesome races that are finishing up, is that the ABS Challenge system is coming to the game next season. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is, it's brought to you by a lot of things. But I first just want to thank you for being here this season. It's been a tough season of Orioles baseball. We still got 4 games remaining in this season. The O's are going to have a losing record. Thanks to everyone who's followed along, making Locked On Orioles your first listen. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Listen wherever you follow. We are not done when the season's done. We're still going daily through November. I got a whole lot of great off-season content planned right here on the show, so stick around even when the season ends. I would argue things are going to get a little bit better than they've been for the last 4 months on this podcast as we get to break down what's going to be the most important Orioles offseason in a long, long time for this franchise. And that is thanks to all you who are here every day. Those who pop in and out, definitely appreciate you here on the pod. And thank you for your patience as well. Did not have a Wednesday episode, was doing some travel for work. I just kind of made it impossible to do so, but it was nice to see an Orioles win on Tuesday night, as that is where we begin with today's episode. Because if I begin with what happened at the end of Wednesday night, I might not be the host of Locked On Orioles 24 hours after this. So let's start with the Tuesday night win. Final score from that one, game 1 of this series, the Orioles 6 and the Tampa Bay Rays 0. There was a shutout W there for the O's. I'll get to the 5 things you need to know from that one. And the first thing you need to know is Dean Kremer closed out his season pretty strong in this start. Presumably the last start for Kremer. He would be on regular rest to pitch Sunday, but because the Orioles have been going with a 6-man rotation here in September, it's unlikely that he would throw again. It would be lined up for Kyle Bradish or potentially someone from AAA to come up and make that final start on the final game of the season on Sunday. But 6 1/3 scoreless innings for Kremer, 1 hit, 4 Ks, no walks on 97 pitches, 2 hard hit balls, and he finishes with a 4.23 ERA in 30 outings this year. That's a solid year. And after that horrible March and April, right, he had the 7.04 ERA, 3.61 ERA in the final 5 months of the season. You will absolutely take that from a guy who's kind of billed as a number 4 or a number 5 starter. In a season full of injuries, really, it was him and Tomoyuki Sugano who stayed healthy the entire time. And Kremer threw a lot more innings than Sugano. And at this point is the only Orioles qualified starting pitcher. And he did have a really poor final 2 starts of August, but hey, a 1.20 ERA in his 3 September starts continues the theme of his career, where he starts off really cold and ends seasons really hot. And that was even where, he missed almost 2 weeks. He had that forearm soreness scare in the middle where he skipped a start. That's why he only made 3 starts in the month of September. But a good way to finish his season. Tuesday, it was the splitter. I mean, not a ton of swing and miss on the pitch like we usually see. It was 5 whiffs, but it got him 7 outs on balls in play on that splitter. He had maybe the best command I've ever seen of that pitch in Tuesday's start. Probably has a little bit to do with the fact that Adley Rutschman was back catching him for the first time in a while. We will get to that. Those two have worked together for a long, long time. But just the 3rd start of the season for Kremer without a walk. His first this season of a start over 3 innings in which he allowed less than 3 hits. I mean, you could argue he ended his season with the best start of the year. That should make Kremer feel good going into the offseason, where the goal should be Dean Kremer comes into spring training as the Orioles' number 5 starter next year. That should be the goal. He is a perfect number 5 starter on a good team. That means your rotation's in a really, really good spot if Dean Kremer's your 5. That should be the goal for the Orioles with the moves they make this offseason. Second thing you need to know from Tuesday's win is that it ended up being one of the best team pitching performances for the Orioles this season. Not just the 6 1/3 they got from Dean Kremer, but for the Orioles this season, I mean, only allowed 2 hits and 1 walk, and that 1 walk came on a 3-2 pitch with 2 outs in the top of the 9th inning from Yarmiel Geraldo. They were 1 pitch away from going the entire game without walking anybody, which you love to see. 3 or fewer base runners in a game for the Orioles, just the 3rd time this season that they have done that. It was June 23rd when Trevor Rogers allowed 3 singles in 8 scoreless innings against the Rangers. And then August 15th when Brandon Young had a perfect game for 7 2/3 innings in Houston. Only other 2 games where Orioles pitchers allowed 3 base runners or fewer in a game. And it was nice because the offense, which has been basically silent in September, did enough. I mean, 6 runs isn't some explosion, but it kind of is compared to what the Orioles have been doing the last couple of weeks offensively. The 6-0 lead allowed for them to not have to use Dietrich Enns and Rico Garcia for the, seemingly 8th straight time, it would seem, in all of these close games they've been playing. Instead, they were able to use Jose Castillo to finish off the 7th. Colin Selby got in there for a 1-2-3 8th. It was his first appearance since July 28th. He was activated off the injured list on Tuesday, coming back from that hamstring injury that took him out for a couple of months. Jose Espada was optioned down to AAA to make room for Selby. I would have liked to seen Espada again, but Selby's a guy the Orioles really, really like, so they probably wanted to get him a couple of outings in the big leagues before the season was over. And then we saw Yarmiel Geraldo again, did walk a guy, but closed it out with a 0 in the 9th, was just throwing that filthy changeup again and again, and Rays hitters basically had no chance against that thing. I really like that pitching performance. It's been a struggle offensively in September, but again, the reason why the Orioles have played better baseball in this month, I mean, this is the best pitching month they've had. Bullpen starters especially, the arms have just been outstanding, and it's certainly not the same group we saw at the beginning of this season, but that's definitely been a positive way to end off this fairly negative year for the Orioles. Third thing you need to know from Tuesday is that Jordan Westburg finally had a nice day since coming off the injured list. He had been 1 for 21 with 10 strikeouts and just 3 hard hit balls since being activated off the IL on September 18th from that ankle injury. But he had a single, a double, an RBI sac fly in Tuesday's win, couple of hard hit balls as well. You like to see that from Westburg, who drove in 2 Orioles runs on Wednesday night as well. So maybe the bat heating up. Not that it's super important now with 4 games remaining in the season, but at the very least, he can finish an injury-riddled season strong, you would hope. Fourth thing you need to know from Tuesday's win is that Adley Rutschman finally returned for the Orioles. Now, it's not a huge deal whether he had returned or he just missed the rest of the season with the state the Orioles are in, but it is nice that he's going to get on the field for the rest of the year. Was activated off the IL on Tuesday with Luis Vasquez being optioned to AAA to make room for Adley. He'd been out since August 18th with a right oblique strain. That was after having a left oblique strain earlier in the season that kept him out for a while. He did go 0 for 4 with a strikeout at the plate. Not much juice when he was in the box, but he did catch Dean Kremer. That certainly helped Dean to have Rutschman back, and just nice to see Adley on the field. He did have a walk Wednesday, didn't have a hit. Hopefully he'll get a couple of knocks in these final 4 games. I'm sure he won't play in all of them. He certainly won't catch the day game after the night game on Thursday here, but hopefully we get at least, one good Adley game in these final 4 and just give us a little bit better feeling on him heading into the offseason. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 6-0 win over the Rays on Tuesday night to open up this series is that Colton Cowser delivered was kind of the punishing blow in this game. A 2-run homer in the 6th inning off Rays lefty reliever Ian Seymour made it a 6-0 ball game. Hit it 108.1 off the bat, tied for the hardest hit ball by Cowser against a left-handed pitcher this season. The home run was also, it was mashed, 426 feet. Also tied his longest homer against a left-handed pitcher this season. And he did have a single earlier in the game against Seymour, who kind of pitched in like long relief mop-up duty for the Rays in this game after they pulled their starter Pepio early. They pulled their starters early in both these games. They're kind of trying to limit the innings here at the end of a lost season for them. But it was the first multi-hit game for Colton Cowser since September 2nd. It'd been 3 weeks since he'd done that. And more specifically, first game all season. Now, granted, Cowser missed, 2 months with that hand injury, but first game all season in which Colton Cowser had multiple hits against a left-handed pitcher in the same game. And it's just the 4th time in his career since being called up back in 2023 that he has done that. So Really good sign for Cowser, who's had a rough year. Just a good, really solidly played, nice looking overall win for the Orioles on Tuesday night. You love to see that. Unfortunately, it did not carry over to Wednesday night. But the loss for the Orioles is not really the story. It's what happened at the end. And as I'm recording here on Wednesday night, there's been some quotes from Pete Fairbanks and others, but one of the worst looks I've maybe ever seen from a player on the field. We're going to talk about the debacle with Fairbanks and the fallout of a potential Samuel Basallo injury from the loss on Wednesday. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And FanDuel is great because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays, especially if you don't want to watch the Ravens try and play football right now. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So let's talk about Wednesday. Final score from the second game of the series was the Rays 6 and the Orioles 2. Series even at a game apiece. Rubber match will be on Thursday afternoon. Orioles now 74 and 84 on the season. Start with the other stuff that happened. Start with what went right from Wednesday, and that was at the very least Tyler Wells finished the season healthy, posting a 2.91 ERA in 4 starts at the end of the year, coming back from that elbow surgery. Again, he will not pitch again this season. He only gave the O's 4 innings. He wasn't exactly great on Wednesday night. 4 innings of 3-run balls, 7 hits, 4 Ks, a walk and a homer on 79 pitches. Definitely the worst start of the 4 that Wells made coming back. Maybe in another spot he would have stayed in for the 5th, but he wasn't looking great. He was at 79 pitches. You want to make sure he just ends the season healthy, and that seems to be the case, even more importantly than ending the season looking good on the mound. But the struggles he had on Wednesday, it is a good reminder of the downside of Tyler Wells, right? In those first 3 starts off the IL, we saw the good side. He's efficient. He throws strikes. He doesn't walk anybody. He gets quick outs. He pitches deep into games. When he's not on, he's not effective. It's a lot of balls in play, a lot of hits. He definitely has a home run problem. We saw that happen to him on Wednesday night as well with the Brandon Lau homer. And it's sometimes too many strikes. It's something I've talked about with Tyler Wells, mostly when he's been in the rotation over the years, is that he actually might benefit from just trying to get a little more chase and throwing some more balls outside the zone. It's great that he, just refuses to walk people. That's sometimes great. It sometimes can backfire. That was one of those times on Wednesday where his stuff is good, but sometimes it's not elite enough for throwing the amount of strikes that Wells does. It's kind of sounds a little counterintuitive when you say it, but you have guys like Spencer Strider, maybe the pre-elbow surgery version of Spencer Strider, where the stuff was so good that Strider threw more pitches in the middle of the strike zone than any other pitcher in baseball. But he was also competing for Cy Young awards every year because the fastball and the slider were so good. It didn't matter if he threw them down the middle, guys still couldn't hit them. Wells has good stuff. It's not nearly to that Strider level. So if he's throwing a lot of balls in the middle of the plate, he's going to get hurt from time to time. We saw that Wednesday. You've seen a lot of that over the years from Wells. So we'll see. It's going to be really interesting to see not as much what they do with Tyler Wells, because guaranteed, unless he's injured, he's going to be on this Orioles opening day roster and a part of this pitching staff in some capacity next year. I think we're all in agreement on that. The question is what the role is going to be, right? I talked about it some after the last start that Wells made on this show, but I think the goal, I mentioned with Dean Kremer, right? What you do in the offseason, the goal should be that Dean Kremer enters spring training as your number 5 starter. I think the goal should also be that Tyler Wells enters spring training as your number 6 starter. I think that should be the goal. The goal should be that when the Orioles pitchers and catchers report in February, the expectation should not be that Tyler Wells is in the rotation to begin the year. Now, he should still be built up as a starter throughout spring training because we know injuries happen and he's great starting depth to have. But in a perfect world, I personally think Tyler Wells is in the Orioles bullpen to begin next year. Will he start some games? Absolutely. You need a lot of starting pitchers to get through a season. But if you do what you need to do this offseason, you don't need both Dean Kremer and Tyler Wells to be in your rotation. That's my opinion of the offseason. I think that's a good barometer, but he's still great starting depth to have. And he showed he can be a really, really good reliever. It makes an important part of this Orioles pitching staff. I'll do the shout out before I do the what went wrong. The shout out goes to Brian Baker, just because we got to see him pitch back at Oriole Park, since the O's traded him a little bit before the deadline, getting the draft pick that they turned into Slater DeBrun at the end of the first round this year. And thank Brian Baker for allowing the Orioles to get on the board, a walk, a single, and then a 2-run single up the middle from Jordan Westburg in the 8th against Baker, accounted for the only 2 runs for the Orioles offense. On Wednesday night, they were actually being no hit through 6 innings in this game. Tyler O'Neill's leadoff single in the 7th broke that up of what could have been a combined no-hitter from the Rays. But it was nice to see him back, right? It's been a 4.66 ERA for Baker in a Rays uniform. The FIP is lower, but his strikeouts are down. His walks are up since leaving the Orioles. We'll see. It's nice to see him back. I still think the Orioles made the right move in that deal that they did with the Rays a couple of months ago. But I like Brian Baker. It was a very up and down time with the Orioles, but he did some good things in Baltimore, and certainly wish him success moving on. Somebody I'm not wishing much success to at this point is Pete Fairbanks. And this is a weird situation. This is so here's what happened. Pete Fairbanks, Rays closer, they haven't won a lot of games lately, so it's not a save situation. They're up 6-2 in the 9th, but he comes in to pitch. It was raining. It's bad weather all day in Baltimore on Wednesday. It rained on and off throughout the game. There was the weather delay to start Tuesday's game because of rain. And Samuel Basallo leads off the 9th inning for the Orioles, and 0-2 fastball from Fairbanks, 97 miles an hour, just drills Basallo in the right hand and wrist area. He immediately goes down. Immediately, the trainers see him, and he comes into the tunnel immediately with the training staff, like right down into the tunnel. Kobe Mayo pinch runs for him. He is out of the game. I mean, at that point, it is what else could go wrong this season, right? There's been so many injuries. Samuel Basallo, he hasn't been amazing since he's been called up, but just the fact that he was called up, had the great minor league season, gets the 8-year extension, right? Becomes the first Oriole finally to get an extension from Mike Elias in this front office. The vibes, at least around Basallo, have been really, really good. And while the injury, even if it is, a broken hand, a broken wrist, things like that, if you're going to have that happen, the final week of a season when you're 10 games under 500 is probably the best time for it to happen. Because like we saw with Colton Cowser last year when he broke his hand in the Orioles' final playoff game, you have time to get a surgery if you need to, rehab it, and be totally fine for spring training. So in terms of the timeline, we don't know exactly what the injury is right now. Tony Mansolino said he's getting x-rays at the moment, and the O's, I'm sure we'll have more information from Tony on Thursday. But even if it is a fracture in there, again, he's going to miss the final 4 games of the season. Even if it's not a fracture, he's most likely going to miss the final 4 games of this season. The O's aren't going to want to risk it with one of their best young players who they just extended. But that's the one part of it. It's just like there's been so many injuries. He's at least stayed generally healthy lately. Now he's going to go down. You hope it's nothing that affects him long term. He should be okay, but you never know with catchers and hitters that rely on the power and the hands and the wrists and everything. Could we not get a couple of games where nobody's going down? Right. And this goes along with a day of injuries for the Orioles, right? Jackson Holliday was out of the lineup because Tony Mansolino said he was dealing with some knee soreness. And it's something that's popped up a couple different times this year. He's been probably the quote unquote healthiest Oriole this season, hasn't gone on the IL. He's played in most games for the O's. He doesn't play. And then we learned that Chase McDermott, who's actually been on the bereavement list since the weekend, didn't get moved back onto the roster, just has been placed on the 15-day injured list with a back issue. So his season is over after kind of coming back up to resurgent as a reliever. Hopefully that's not something long-term. We know he's had his injury issues. So you get all that news, and then you have the Basallo thing happen in the 9th inning of a meaningless 6-2 game between 2 teams with losing records that aren't missing the playoffs in the rain. Like, of course it happens. And it sucks. And you're like, ugh, what a way to end this game. And then Fairbanks, gets the final out, closes out the 6-2 win for the Rays. And all of a sudden, he's chirping the dugout and blows a kiss to the Oriole dugout. After you have hit one of the most promising young players in baseball with a 97-mile-per-hour fastball, he's clearly in, serious agonizing pain, goes right to the dugout. you can assume that there's something broken or fractured in there in Basayo's right hand or wrist. I mean, that's hopefully not. Hopefully the x-rays are clean, but that's what looked like happened with the way that he was in pain. And you're going to blow I mean, the first reaction for me was, how can you be that big of a loser if you're Pete Fairbanks? Like, do you not read the room? Do you not know you just injured one of the most beloved and important players on this Orioles team in a meaningless game? When, hey, yeah, you might be ahead of the Orioles in the standings, but not by much. You're having a losing record and a super disappointing season. You haven't done much for the Rays this year. And that's your reaction to that? So after the game, Tony Mansolino speaks first, and he says, our dugout didn't say anything, because what I thought first happened probably is that one of your best, brightest young players gets nailed with a 97-mile-per-hour fastball in a meaningless game and is clearly injured. You're going to be pissed off if you are a dugout. Similar to when Heston Kjerstad got hit in the helmet by the Clay Holmes fastball last year and got concussed and kind of sent his season and maybe his career at this point on a downward spiral. It was not intentional. It was also rainy. It was slick, everything like that. But Brandon Hyde was rightfully pissed off and came at the Yankees for that, because you're injuring one of their brightest young players. Same kind of scenario here with Basayo. It's clearly not intentional. He's not throwing at anybody in the ninth inning of a 4-run meaningless game, but you're still going to be pissed off if you're the Orioles. So my assumption was, just because of the anger of the situation, understandably, they said something to Fairbanks out of that dugout. And then his response after getting the 3 outs was to, chirp back, whatever, but to blow a kiss. Grow up. What are you, 11 years old with like 8 fighting necklaces on? Get a grip on your life. So Mansolino says, we didn't say anything. He might have been talking to a fan. If he wasn't, I don't know what was going on. Obviously good work by the Orioles beat team going directly to Pete Fairbanks, who, again, he has not hit a batter since September of 2023. So that's something, it was the rain. I don't think it was intentional, but that's just another odd part of this. So they talked to Fairbanks, and Fairbanks's quotes after the game are that he fears terrible about hitting Basayo, wishes him a speedy recovery. And he says the blown kiss was, as Mansolino potentially alluded to, toward a fan sitting behind the Orioles dugout and not anyone in the dugout. Let's take Pete Fairbanks at his word. Let's say some Orioles fan who was rightfully pissed off that Fairbanks had just taken Basayo out for the year said something to Fairbanks, right? And he's blowing a kiss back. Let's take him at his word. You aren't grown up enough to know that you shouldn't be going back at fans like that, especially in that moment. It's one thing if you're just getting chirped, you close out a game and you chirp them back. I don't really mind that one. You know what the chirping is about. The chirping is not, hey, Fairbanks, you stink. It's that, hey, Fairbanks, why'd you just injure our most exciting young player? Even if we all know it was not on purpose. That's clearly what the chirp is about. Can you read the room for 0.5 seconds? Can you have the emotional and social intelligence to read the room, to know, even if it was at a fan and not the dugout, that if you're going to do that to a fan sitting above the Orioles dugout, how, awful that's going to look when it's caught by the Masson cameras, as it clearly was in HD. So even if you take Fairbanks at his word, he still sounds like an idiot. And if you don't, there's scenarios here where, he's the biggest loser in the world. What goes through your mind to make you act like that after you've just injured someone? Shouldn't the first reaction be, I hope he's okay? And again, I'm willing to take him at his word, especially because of something Mansolino brought up. Fairbanks seemed apologetic when he talked to the media afterwards. But even if it is the case that he was doing it to an Orioles fan, you're going to do it right above the dugout after you've just injured someone like that, and you're going to think that's going to go over okay? Just having any situational awareness. At best, he's someone with zero situational awareness. And, we're blowing kisses at people. Like, let's grow up a little bit. And at worst, he's a gigantic loser who, is just a garbage human being, if it's at worst that he was blowing it to the Orioles dugout, saying, haha, I just injured your player. The fallout has made it look, I'll say, not as bad. Still at the end of the day, just a bad look from Fairbanks. And just Can we pull it together? Whatever was going to happen, the Orioles were not going to throw at anybody. The Orioles were not going to hit anybody because although they are a group of kids, they do generally handle themselves like adults. And I will say, just saw some great news come across, Rock tweeting this one out. X-rays on Samuel Basallo's right wrist were negative for a fracture. That is fantastic news to have before I end this episode. But again, even if we're taking Fairbanks at his word, just weird behavior. We've seen some weird behavior from some baseball players this week around the league. Just another example of just weird behavior from these people. Let's end the show with some not so weird behavior. Another, I think, exciting rule change is coming to baseball. I want to give my thoughts on that to finish off the episode. That's coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Rugiet. What do you do what do you get when you have a bald eagle standing on top of a silverback gorilla riding a T-Rex? Confidence, pure confidence. If you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it is time to meet Rugiet. Rugiet's Go Long is here for these scenarios. It's not just another ED pill. It's a total game changer for confidence. Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula, so you can go the distance and the effect can last up to 36 hours. Confidence all day, all night, even into the next day. And the process is simple. Connect with a board-certified doctor 100% online, and your treatment ships directly to your door. Ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom? Head to rugiet.com and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's rugiet.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. And make sure to use our code so they know that we sent you. All right, so with the Pete Fairbanks stuff behind us, let's talk ABS challenge system. This is the big news in Major League Baseball this week, as the league next season will be implementing the automatic ball strike system challenge system for 2026. This is not the full RoboZone. This is not the full robot umpires. This is what they've been mostly doing in AAA for the past couple of years. This is what they implemented at certain spring training parks in big league spring training games this season as well. It would not be the full ABS. It's not the robot system calling every pitch. You get challenges. So the system is working to evaluate the strike zone. And as we saw in spring training, if a hitter doesn't like a call, he can tap his helmet. If a pitcher or a catcher doesn't like a call, they can tap their helmet or their head, and it will go to the very quick, it's like 5 to 10 seconds, video replay review. It shows up on the scoreboard to show all the fans. It shows if it's a strike or not. And obviously, if you get it right, the call changes, whatever it may be, it changes the count. 2 challenges per team per game. You keep them if you continue to get them right. So I think that's a good measure. I think there could eventually be more than 2 challenges, but 2 sounds like a good number at this point. And you would get 1 extra one if the game goes to extra innings in terms of challenges as well. And I think it's going to add another fun part of the game. There might be some issues here or there with the zone early on. You've heard some players be a little concerned about that, even some who have experienced it in AAA. But the general opinion, not just of pundits and people in the front offices, but of the players in AAA, is that the response has been pretty overwhelmingly positive from the players, and even the umpires have not really pushed back on at least the challenge system. The players in AAA feel like it keeps the umpires accountable and makes them better, because they start to see more and more, what the true strike zone should be. I think it's an overall positive for the health of umpires. I think using the challenge system, if it makes umpires better, makes it less likely that we eventually get the full RoboZone. I don't want the full RoboZone. I think the challenge system is perfect. It's quick. If you're a tennis fan, they don't do it as much now, but the old Hawkeye system from a couple years ago, where a player would challenge an out call and they'd have it come up on the screen, everyone would clap, 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 and you'd see the ball hitting the ground and the shadow of the ball. It wouldn't quite reach the line, so it was out, and you get the big cheer. It was so quick. It was so easy. It was painless. The technology was good. It involved not just the viewers at home, but the people in the ballpark get to see the replay happen as well. It adds a little bit of suspense. And I really do think that there's certainly been some bad decisions, bad things Rob Manfred has done as commissioner. But I do think his lasting legacy, at least on the positive side, whenever he plans to retire, I think after 2028, whenever he hangs it up as MLB commissioner, will be the positive rule changes he made for this game. The stolen base rules have added excitement. I love the zombie runner and extra innings. I think that adds a lot of tenseness and excitement. And I love the challenge system, and I'm very excited it's going to be here next year. The Orioles have been one of the teams, data-wise, who have been kind of screwed more by bad umpire calls behind home plate than any other team. So maybe this adds a win or two to the Orioles next year as well. Maybe the luck can kind of turn in their direction. That is certainly a good thing. But I think this is just going to make umpires more accountable. I think it's going to make them better in the long run. And I think it's going to add another level of excitement when someone challenges a call. What's the strategy? Do you not use your challenges too early? Because in case you lose them, then you don't have them the rest of the game. Do you wait? Are there certain players you do and don't trust to challenge? Do you only let your catcher challenge and not let your pitcher challenge? I think it's going to be really interesting to see how teams sort this out. And if there are players who they're just like, this guy gets a little ahead of himself, we can't give him the power to challenge it, because you do have to do it quickly, right? It's not like it can come from the manager. It's got to basically be the batter, catcher, or pitcher making that call in almost a split second to challenge it. So there's got to be guys you trust and maybe don't trust to make those calls. I think it adds another part of strategy into the game that I think will be really, really fun. But let me know your thoughts right here in the Locked On Orioles YouTube comment section. What are your thoughts on adding the challenge system? If you have questions about it moving forward, but I definitely do think it's going to be a nice addition to the game. That'll do it for today's episode. We are back tomorrow. Hopefully there's no kisses blown and Orioles injured in the rubber match between the O's and the Rays, 1:05 p.m. Eastern time. It's the Oriole Park finale in the 2025 season. The right-hander Drew Rasmussen goes for the Rays. The lefty Cade Povich is on the mound for the Orioles. And I'll be back on Friday recapping the final game between the Rays and the O's, get you set for the final series of the year between O's and Yankees. And if we do have any Samuel Basallo updates, I'll certainly get them your way as well. That's coming up, though, on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.